Now, the other thing that needs to be borne in mind with regard to what was going on at this particular time in history is the fact that the Spanish Muslims were very liberal, given the culture of the time, the temper of the time. Jewish scholars, Christian scholars, and Muslim scholars, before the creation of Israel and before the Cold War, if you go back, you look at those books, you will see that they saw Spain as the halcyon days of interfaith coexistence. Because at that time in Spain, the Christian, the Jew, and the Muslims lived together. In retrospect, this was an ideal time in the literature when these religious communities coexisted. Of course, they were not, and here you speak from the point of view of someone living in the United States in the 1990s. Spain was certainly, Muslim Spain, in my view, was certainly not America of the 1990s, where you have separation of church and state, and theoretically, no single religion enjoys hegemony over the others, even though numerically, in the American context, you have more Christian than Jews or Muslim or Buddhists or Baha'i or Hindus. You see what I'm saying? But in Muslim Spain, what you did have was a civilization where the Muslims enjoy hegemony, politically speaking, but culturally and socially, the groups that saw themselves as minorities were able to move freely in that culture within the limits determined by their civilization and their culture. And I think that becomes very important when we look at Muslim Spain, vis-a-vis, say, American society of the 1990s. But like all civilizations, they go through stages. There is no one period in the history of Andalusia which was replicated across time and space throughout. That doesn't happen. All civilizations go through changes. You may have good times and bad times. The civilization goes up and then down, or up again. And this is something that what we have to take into account, because there were instances where you had fights between these factions. Earlier on, I pointed out to you that there were dynastic and personal interests among the kings. When some of these Muslim kings in these petty kingdoms would align with some Christians against another Muslim, and vice versa. You had those developments in the history of Spain. But when you look at really the material base of the Andalusian civilization, you will say that in the Andalusian civilization, these Spanish Muslims were able to create a society where the Christians, the Jews, and the Muslims together live in a social and cultural system where individuals were able to rise to higher points on the political ladder than they were elsewhere in the Muslim world. And that's one reason why Andalusian Spain, Muslim Andalusia is widely celebrated now when we look retrospectively